I'm going to tell you something. If you two never bother me again in the rest of my life, I ain't giving up that stuff. I can't. There's good friends of mine out of the fucking state. Well, he could board you have to do it first.
That's why I said to you before, you don't understand. It's not for me that the boss is your boss. Understand?
I'm the move for toys or games or kidding, right? I'm on the move for plans, I'm on the move for games, I'm not on the move for none of that stuff there. This is going to be a prison muscle till I die. Be an hour from now, be it tonight, or 100 years from now, I'm in jail. You're going to be a resident.
You ain't supposed to be alive. Because I was making an example out of you for any motherfucker that planted on me again. You understand? So the only reason you're still alive, don't think because we stopped. It was because that woman walked in the door. Then you would have been gone. You weren't supposed to walk away no more. You me, and that was the worst thing you ever did.
You're a good debater and you're not afraid of a fight. So why have your comments off? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I've turned them on for a lot of things.
On your shorts you do.
Right. In some of my lives, I think they're on. But almost as soon as I turn them on, there's photos of my family's homes. What's the address?
Yeah.
And at what point, and I just want to clarify.
Yeah, please.
I don't have to take that abuse.
Agreed.
Like, I don't come to work and slap the dick out of their mouth.
Kind of why do you have a disdain for informants, in your opinion?
I don't disdain them. I downright fucking hate them. Okay. That's okay. But see, this is why I can say it. That Jeff's crazy. He's on medication. I have a disdain for them because no man should ever go to prison on the words of another man, number one. Number two, in 90% of the cases you look at, the informant has done more vile, disturbing crap than those that are being accused. Number three, I find it oxymoronic when a man, Joey Merlino, because everybody knows who he is, he goes in front of a judge, they can bring up everything he's ever been accused of, including murders and whatever else. Even though he's acquitted, it doesn't really matter because it's a character judgment. But yet in that same case, you can't turn that around and say, well, let's judge the rat. Judges don't allow that. So for me, it's like you're walking in, you're already behind the eight ball.
And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie. And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am Jeff Canarsie, and today, what you're going to see, anytime we do this informant series, we're not just giving you the FBI files. What we're giving you is a background of who that character is, where he came from, and why he went bad. Because in most of the cases that we actually do research, not everybody goes bad for the same reasons. Sometimes a guy just goes bad because he's got nothing better to do. And today we're going to be talking about Dominic Butch Blasi, who was really Sam Giancana, who was only ever really a front boss in Chicago. We're going to be talking about errand boy Blasi, because that's essentially what he was. And you're going to find out who he is and why he went bad and the ramifications of that. So enjoy the show. All right. We are going to start another episode of You Dirty Rat. And once again, we come to you with another file of a guy that you may not have known was a filthy rat. One thing that we always sort of say, and we said this the other night on our live, is that sometimes it's hard to wade through the murky waters of informants because sometimes they're pretty spot on, and at other times, the stuff that they do tell us is absolutely confusing. What is different about this case this week, and you all know how much I hate to say this shit, But this guy gave the feds a lot of truth. And I've always said, and not to distort my views, but informants do lie. And I've always said that. They always invent to inflate. But they also do tell the truth at times as well. There is zero reason for them to actually tell the truth because the federal system of analyzing facts really comes down to corroboration. And oftentimes, if another rat mentions something similar, they have it. That's their corroboration that they need. And it's not necessarily ebbed and glued in facts, but rather a collection of people agreeing or saying something similar. With that said, some of the stuff that we're going to look at this week with our rat Fink, I'm kind of astonished. Most of what he did provide, I really can't refute. And for those of you wondering who we're going to talk about, it's Dominic Butch Blasi. That's right, he was a fucking rat. And for a long time, he has been called literally the best source of information about organized crime in Chicago history. Now, what I do have is access to some of those files, but this is a guy who the FBI still seems to be protecting because most of the files on Butch Blasi are still sealed. And while there is, a ton of information, what I was only able to get my hands on legally speaking is interesting to say the least. It's not a ton. But just so you know, Dominic Butch Blasi essentially was a gopher for 3 different Chicago mob bosses going back to the 1950s. According to reports, he was with Sam Giancana the night Giancana got whacked, which is what led the FBI to think that he either did it or he knew who did it. So let me just scroll down a little bit here. Okay. I think I'm going to read these 2 teletypes. Let me just make this big. All right. This was from the director of the FBI 92-3171, SAG Chicago. The subject, Momo, Sam Giancana. Chicago offices completed analysis of the information developed in the instant matter as it concerns of the gangland type slaying of Sam Giancana, former boss of organized crime in Chicago, at his residence in Oak Park, Illinois, July 1975. The purpose of this analysis is to suggest that Legat, Mexico City be requested to make contact with a Mexican official as detailed here and below, who is believed to be in a position where he might be knowledgeable concerning certain machinations involving Giancana while Giancana was in self-imposed exile in Mexico during the period of 1966 to 74, which might serve to shed some light on the motives for his killing. So in other words, they want to know what the fuck he was doing in Mexico, who he talked to. The following is a composite of information obtained in recent years through a highly placed Chicago informant who was intimately associated with Giancana before, during, and after 1966 to the 74 period. Let's see. This former CG 7177-PC, also known as Butch Blasi, undoubtedly is the closest intimate friend of Giancana during this period in Mexico and is a prominent Chicago La Cosa Nostra member, CG 7016 CTE, until his death in July of 76, one of the top half dozen leaders in organized crime in Chicago for decades, and CG 6481 CTE, a prominent Chicago LCN member who was close Giancana associate before 66. They gave Butch Blasi 2 different numbers for some reason. Anyway, he visited Giancana in Mexico from time to time. It was very close to Sam Giancana upon his return. All right, let me look at this second one. CG 7177 accompanied Giancana to Mexico in June of 66 and lived with him there for almost the entire period of Giancana's hiatus in Mexico, traveling with him throughout the world and performing many troubleshooting jobs for Giancana. This informant had many contacts in Mexico, and it was he who encouraged Giancana to go there in the first place, and also on the basis that certain privileges would be obtained for him there. Blasi introduced Giancana to George Castillo, a very influential Mexican attorney with contacts in the higher levels of the Mexican government. Blasi advised that Castillo made contact with Luis Echeverria Alvarez, then the Minister of Government in 1966 and now the President of Mexico. According to this information, Castillo was able to provide a certain considerations to Echeverria, which enabled Giancana to remain in Mexico from 1966 to 1974, even though he had been declared undesirable, a category which ordinarily precluded a person from remaining in Mexico. As the Legat Mexico City will recall, many efforts were made to the effect of the expulsion of Giancana during this period, but it was not until 1974, some 4 years after Echeverria was elected president, that he was actually expelled. Let's see. Blasi was involved, but there were other sources. It is known that Giancana was involved in a CIA plot in the period of 1959 until early 60s in the effective and the removal of Fidel Castro in Cuba. Involved in this plot was Johnny Roselli, well documented from many sources, including Chicago, highly confidential sources, as a Giancana associate. Lieutenant. Roselli, of course, was murdered earlier this year in Florida, and some months after his boss involved with him in this scheme was murdered as well. Blasi, who was close to Giancana for decades and during this period upon return from Mexico, claims that Giancana's murder was not a Chicago mob contract and that he believes the murder was accomplished by forces outside of organized crime. So take that as you want. That's some bullshit as far as I'm concerned. But the one other source who's been mentioned above, Blasi, however, advised that Giancana was having a conflict with the current Chicago organized crime leaders, namely Tony Accardo, Gus Alex, and Joe Ayupa, over a highly lucrative source of income which Giancana set up while he was boss in the 50s and 60s in Chicago, which he claimed thereafter was his personal project and one that did not belong to Chicago organized crime. So that's something I've never heard before. So I learned something. Blasi furnished this information prior to his this was okay. Let me skip. Hold on. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. I was reading something that had nothing to do with it. Okay, let me go down to this part. 1 second. So, like I said, there's not a ton of information about Blasi because his FBI file is still sealed. And a lot of this has come as a result of me actually cross-indexing other FBI reports. But according to FBI reports, Blasi becomes an informant in and around September of 1966 or so. We know that because of an FBI memo that Blasi met with FBI field agents at their office. At the time, Giancana had fled to Mexico, and the FBI at the time was looking for Giancana and had been around busting balls all over Chicago, harassing guys left and right. Sam Battaglia, who had taken over the reins as acting boss, or at least the street boss, in Chicago, was in a state of settling in after Giancana took off. Blasi, who had visited the FBI before, hadn't really given much in terms of crimes and names. This according to the FBI memos, but it just simply means that, he didn't give them anything enough for them to make criminal charges. But I always tend to see this as, especially in informing cases, that the FBI is wooing the mobster and the mobster is wooing them. However, at this meeting, Blasi opened up wide and subtly said that he would only discuss himself. At this meeting, he was given the code name Romano and giving the code CG6481. Well, at the time, Blasi might have only said he'd give information about himself. That suddenly changes when Sam Battaglia becomes the acting boss. And if you think it was prior to Battaglia taking over, look, Blasi was an important guy. He carried a certain weight about him because of his access to bosses and because he had been working for the bosses, and he was the guy responsible for sending messages from captains to bosses. Under Battaglia, he was no longer important. He was no longer Little Lord Fauntleroy. Any influence that he might have carried was gone. He was down and out when the FBI agent, Special Agent William Romer, approaches him. Romer was good at flipping guys, and Blasi was the second guy he flipped in 1966 alone. Southside Chicago boss Ralph Pierce was the first, and he was already cooperating with Romer. So for the next few months, Blasi would meet Romer, and they would go out to dinner together, have drinks together, and the two became close friends. Romer stated in his files that he took it nice and easy with Blasi. He didn't push too hard out of fear. that Blasi would get rattled and then stop providing information. Romer's technique was to just let Blasi talk, and he would guide him to certain things that he needed answers to, and Blasi begins providing that information. And for the next 10 years, Blasi would feed information to William Romer. So from a 1975 debriefing, Blasi provided the following information. On February 14th of 1975, Blasi advised to Romer that since Giancana had returned to the Chicago area, his only friends were Butch Blasi and Charlie English. Blasi reported that he met with Charlie down in Florida a few months prior, and that English said he was going to stay down in Florida over the winter. March 6th of 75, Blasi tells Romer that Giancana and him met several times on and off over the last few months. He would also explain that he got his start in the Mafia in the 1950s working for Tony Accardo, basically being his gopher and his errand boy. Then 2 years later, when Giancana becomes the at least street boss, he goes to work for him. March 20th of 75, Blasi tells Romer he's closed his fraudulent real estate business and all of his money has dried up, but he's living off some investments in Social Security. And so as you can see, he's not really giving a whole lot. And even as Giancana got pushed out, Blasi remained loyal to him. Blasi would admit that he helped Giancana sneak out of the United States to Mexico by putting him in the trunk of his car and driving him out of Chicago, and drops him off at the St. Louis airport to catch a flight to Mexico. Blasi explains that Giancana was in Mexico and taking over large gambling interests there, and that he was able to do this by paying government officials to look the other way. Here's another thing. Giancana also expanded interests into Lebanon, Iran, and the Caribbean. According to Blasi, he went to Mexico to help Giancana establish a base of operations and put money into the right pockets of officials. Blasi then goes on to say that while Giancana was hiding in Mexico, he handled all of Giancana's Shylock money and businesses, and Pierce, the other informant, backed up Blasi's claims. So this is a guy who's not lying, okay? Blasi would tell Romer that he was summoned to Houston, Texas by Giancana in June of 1975. Giancana was in the hospital for emergency gallbladder surgery. He had been visiting friends in Houston when he fell ill. His gallbladder was removed by the renowned surgeon, Dr. Michael DeBakey. Giancana would actually require more surgery days later after a blood clot was discovered. However, Blasi said that Giancana was very secretive about his health, and he insisted that Blasi tell nobody in the outfit about his condition out of fear that they would try to kill him. Even Charlie English was kept in the dark about that. So Giancana only wanted his immediate family to near him in the hospital. Blasi said that Giancana's eldest daughter, Antoinette, was told to stay home. Giancana had fallen out with her after she divorced her husband and gave up custody of her 5 kids. His longtime girlfriend, actress and singer Phyllis McGuire, was informed of his surgery but was told not to visit. Giancana did allow his latest paramour, Carolyn Morris, to come and see him. Days after returning to Chicago from Houston, Giancana was shot 6 times in the head by a .22 caliber firearm in the basement of his Oak Park home. He had just celebrated a welcome home party with friends and family members and his 2 closest mob associates and friends, Charlie English and Dominic Butch Blasi. Law enforcement immediately suspected that he was killed by somebody who attended that party. Here's where it gets interesting. Witnesses said that they saw Blasi re-entering Giancana's residence. He had allegedly gone home earlier, but they saw him come back and enter the house 15 minutes before he was killed. And the murder weapon was found ditched on the same exact route in between the murder scene and Blasi's home. In his memoir, Romer wrote about allegedly trying to interview Blasi about Giancana's murder. According to Romer's published account, Blasi told him, "Mr. Romer, I have nothing to say to you about this. I won't insult your intelligence by telling you I wasn't there before it happened, but I won't talk to you about it. If you have a warrant or subpoena, fucking serve me. But if you don't, I say to you, in all respect, I'm not going to discuss it with you or anybody else." Blasi secretly spoke to Romer and told him that he had spent a good part of the day with Giancana. Blasi said that Giancana was pretty much in good spirits and had a relaxed mood. He said that Giancana gave no indication that he was aware that he was going to be killed later that night. Blasi would once again deny taking part in killing Giancana, but it doesn't appear he doesn't really seem to have offered a credible alternative suspect, despite the circumstantial evidence that was against him. Instead, he tells Romer that Giancana was killed by forces outside of organized crime, and this seems to be a suggestion merely that Giancana's murder was somehow tied up into his role in the CIA plot to kill Fidel Castro. But the more likely reason was that outfit leaders believed Giancana was going to talk about his criminal history at a Senate committee hearing that was set to begin a couple of days later. So, 2 years after Giancana's death, Blasi floats another reason for why the former boss, Sam Giancana, street boss, was killed. You guys ready for this one? He told Agent Romer that Giancana was fucking Tony Spilatro's wife. According to Blasi, Giancana enjoyed having relationships with numerous women at the same exact time. The Spilatro's residence was only a few blocks from Giancana's house, which gave him access to carry on that affair. Now, if that's true, then that makes all the sense in the world as to why Tony Spilatro blew his fucking head off, right? So, in 1975, when Paul Ricca dies, Blasi tells Romer that Gus Alex, who was a Chicago outfit associate, a great mobster, is now a part of a 3-member ruling panel with Joe Aiuppa and Anthony Accardo. He would say that Accardo was the boss and that Aiuppa was the street boss, but he didn't give a position for Gus Alex, but yet mentions him regardless. This exact information was also corroborated by Ralph Pierce. Blasi would offer that while Alex was not Italian and he couldn't be made, he was the one guy in Chicago who was powerful enough, and even if he was not Italian, he would be treated with the utmost respect like he was a boss by everyone. Blasi would explain that Alex, who had once controlled the Loop gambling empire, was being used more to grease local politicians for favors these days. When pressed, Blasi would explain that Alex was the smartest mobster he had ever met, and that he wouldn't go to functions, wouldn't go to funerals, wouldn't go to parties, wouldn't go to marriages, nothing, out of fear of catching a conspiracy charge. I'm laughing because it reminds me of somebody. It just reminds me of somebody. And if Chris Gorky's listening, it reminds me of Uncle Fester. I ain't going to no marriage. I ain't going to no wedding. I ain't going to no fucking funeral. I'm not getting no fucking conspiracy charge. I'll never forget the guy tells me at Joey Merlino Street, Jeff, go out there and distract the fucking press. So what do you do? He goes, I don't give a fuck. Go out there and flap your fucking wings and pull your cock out of your pants. I don't care. Get them the fuck away so I can leave here and not get photographed. So I went down with a cigarette in my face, started flapping my arms, started screaming, go get jobs, you fucking vultures. No, I didn't pull my prick out. God, I'd have gone to jail for that. Dave Schratweiser would have had a good time with that. Because he was there. Him and I had some nasty words that day. But anyway, William Romer would ask about Frank Sinatra. And Blasi would explain that the fallout between Sinatra and Giancana was basically over John Kennedy. He explained that Sinatra had been brought into the mix through Joe Kennedy and had aligned the Mafia to all stump for Kennedy. According to Blasi, Sinatra got blamed for the entire Kennedy problem, especially when Robert Kennedy began his little fucking witch hunts. And Giancana just basically blamed Sinatra for every single thing that happened. Blasi would say that Giancana felt he lost face with the mob because of that, but that Gambino and Trafficante told Giancana to leave Sinatra the fuck alone and that it wasn't his fault, it was the fault of the Irish bastards who stabbed them in the back. A week before Giancana was murdered, Sinatra actually called Sam Giancana, invited him out to dinner, and Giancana refused to even see him. Romer would question Blasi about the murder of L.A. mob boss Frank Bompanzero. Bompanzero, as you know, was a rat, and the FBI was worried more so that his informant status had come out, and it had been leaked to the press. Blasi said that Bompanzero was a friend of his. Bompanzero had done business in Las Vegas with the outfit in the past. Blasi would tell Romer that he had no idea who killed him or why. He admitted to Romer that he wasn't in Chicago on the day of the murder. He added, though, that Anthony Accardo, Joe Aiuppa, Joe Cerrone, and James Torello, all prominent members of the Chicago Mafia, were also traveling at the time of the murder. And as it turned out, the outfit had nothing to do with this murder, but it's uncertain if Blasi would have told the FBI had he actually known. Based on the available FBI documents, it doesn't appear that Blasi was inclined to provide the FBI with information on murders that he seemed likely to actually know about. He was so unhelpful into the investigation of the murder of outfit bigwig Charlie Nicoletti in 1977. Nicoletti was shot 3 times in the back of the head, while he was sitting in his automobile. Blasi told Romer that he didn't know why Nicoletti was killed. And it's understandable that Blasi wouldn't want to discuss the Giancana murder because he's a fucking suspect. But it really does seem hard to believe that someone who spent decades next to the Chicago mob's inner circle wouldn't know a thing about the murders of Roselli and Nicoletti, or even couldn't speculate about who could have killed them and what the motives might have been. Blasi tells Romer in 1975 that he had officially retired from working. He had shut down his Park Avenue realty company, was now living off investments and Social Security benefits. He had downsized by selling his second automobile and was now only driving his Cadillac. There was no indication in the available FBI documents that Blasi was still criminally active in any sort of way. However, he did continue to consort with outfit leaders. Blasi wasn't designated as an FBI top echelon informant until around 75 or 76, and that's 10 years after he first cooperated. And so that's the thing. Most of these files that I have, guess what? I don't have access to. 75 and 76, very hard to get. And the reason why is because he had to have been giving up something. But he does appear to have been sort of circumspect about the kind of information that he shared with the FBI. In fact, Romer claimed in his memoir that Blasi later denied ever being an informant when another FBI agent approached him for information. Rat, I ain't no rat. You're talking to the wrong fuck. So we're never going to know what he gave up in that decade after the fact when he becomes top echelon, because just being a regular CI is one thing. You can get kind of paperwork on that, and then you cross index to find out who they are. But once you become that top echelon bullshit, they're still sealed. I can't get them. But we're never going to know what actually he did give up because so many of those files are still sealed. But the fact that William Romer said that he was the greatest source of information in organized crime history in Chicago, that tells me there's some serious paperwork and there's some serious shit he gave up. Because basically everything I just told you is kind of like, well, he didn't really say shit. He just kind of jerked Romer off in the office. I mean, that's what it came. That's really what it comes down to. But until those files are unsealed, we can only speculate. But a large reason why I brought this up, even though there's not a lot of, he was still a rat, okay? But the reason why I brought this up was to show you a different side of organized crime informant files. Because very often I give you all the meat and the potatoes and you're like, whoa, what a rat. This is a situation that is common as well. What I just told you today was very common. This is how an informant begins. Little things here, acknowledgments there, a little acknowledgement here, a little acknowledgement there. And then once they get that top informant echelon shit, then everything gets sealed. And for some reason, he must have given up some serious shit because his files are still sealed. I mean, Christ, Greg Scarpa's files aren't sealed. Look at how much he knew. They're still protecting this guy? Fuck out of here. But like I've said before, and all of the informant files that I've poured through over the years, this is the one informant that the FBI has really gone to extremes to protect and done a good job doing it. And that makes me tend to believe that he did give up a hell of a lot more information than we currently know. But I thought, to be fair and balanced, that this was the right way to go this week, to show you that he was legitimately giving the FBI some true shit. He really was, because it was nothing salacious. It was, well, I went down to Mexico with him, but it's still a rat fucking thing to do. And if you're going to talk about that, you're going to talk about anything. But I wanted to be able to show you guys the differences between full frontal versus side boob informants. This is a side boob informant, whereas Greg Scarpa's full frontal from day one. And we don't know why Blasi did it. And I think the relevant argument that once Battaglia took over, he was no longer important. He was no longer the boss's bitch. So he starts ratting. And I'm sure that there was some money involved, because when the guy says, I'm living off Social Security, well, i.e. send me some money. Money. I'll never forget, there was this mob informant on Facebook years ago. He's passed away. Frank Ganji. I got to be honest, Frank used to crack me up because he would attack other informants. He goes, what kind of an informant are you? You were John Gotti Jr.'s bitch. He goes, I worked next to Tommy Karate, you fuck. I saw shit you could only fucking dream about. I had nightmares my whole fucking life from the fucking women's heads being chopped off, you fucking weirdo. And they would fight back and forth. As a matter of fact, type in John A. Light versus Frank Gangi, Gangi, and then hit images on Google, and oh my God. I remember watching that as it happened. They would just fight each other. One's calling the other one drunk. The other's calling the other one a fucking rat. Frank Gangi would scream, I'm going to get a fork and stab your fucking eyes out of your fucking head. I mean, it was hilarious shit to watch. But out of all of them, I thought that Frank Gangi was the most honest. He really was. I really think he was the most honest. And the reason why I said money is because he would go to fucking, he wanted me to write his book, and I wouldn't have nothing to do with it because he was an informant and he knew that. But he would see me post something about, like, you know, we're going to film this, we're going to film that. And he would come in and go, money, because that's what he wanted. He wanted money so fucking bad. God bless Frank, even though he was a fucking informant, man. At least he was honest for the most part. You know, I didn't like what he did. He knew I didn't like what he did. Tommy especially didn't like what he fucking did. But Frank used to write shit on my Facebook. I had a dream about Tommy last night. I'm afraid he's going to get out. So a friend of mine was joking with me. He goes, you know what you ought to do, Jeff? He goes, get a cutout of Tommy Patera, poke out his eyes and put like those glowing red hot eyeball like lights. And he goes, hide that shit in Frank's living room one night, bang on the door. He comes walking out and he sees the Tommy Patera lights light up in his living room. He'd probably die of a fucking heart attack right there. Oh God. So yeah. Oh God, the things, if you guys only knew a quarter of the shit I know, the quarter of the shit I've experienced, it would blow your fucking mind. And that's what cracks me up about the YouTube jerks. It really does at the end of the day, because they have no idea the shit I've been involved in, the shit I've gone through. Someday, when some of these people are dead, I might be able to tell the stories, because while they're alive, I don't think that they would look too kindly on that. And I just believe sometimes you got to keep stories to yourself. But maybe I've told you guys some stories, but you haven't realized it was real. Maybe I've told you some stuff in a joke or in a joking way or as an example that were real. And that's only happening to me. I don't see any of these other jerk-offs on YouTube going through any of this. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. Anyway, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we are getting to the Q&A portion of the show. Stay tuned on